Hello.
I wouldn't care about going.
Oh, good. Thank you. Wait, watch your cord. Watch your cord. Okay. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can. Hang on. I'm negotiating.
I don't see you.
Give me a second.
Okay.
Here. Do you want your water?
But I
You
do.
want your yogurt?
Hey, I don't want to be sitting here long enough.
Well, you might want to go up and hang out with Mommy then. Just put your mask on. You have your mask?
I would take a good distance.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Oops. Sorry about that. Just trying to secure a kid.
Don't worry about it. It
All
sounded like you made it though. You did good.
I'll try.
Sorry, you're looking at the back of my head because I just want to see. I can see you. Hi, my name's Corey. I am the director of event technology at the facility that we're at. And I just wanted to introduce myself so that you just know that you're not talking to some random person. I am going to do changing some views so that the room just sees your face. And then when the other people come on in, it'll be in about maybe 5-10 minutes.
Yep. I'm trying to figure out whether to use my room or a background.
Is that your house?
Yes.
I like the house.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
Uh-huh.
All right, so let me use some stuff here. Oh, no.
And we start at the top of the hour, is that right?
We start at, it should be 2:40, I believe is what the agenda says.
I see. So in like 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And the audio is okay on your end?
Yeah, you sound great. You sound real good. It's like you're actually here.
I don't think I got like an order of battle for the panel.
I don't know. Yeah, I was in charge of getting you on a screen and
Fair
recording.
enough.
So I think we're getting close. All right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna hop off real quick, but you can hear me, you can see the room, correct?
I can hear you and I see the room, the front of the room. I don't see the back of the room.
The audience, correct?
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna head on just to the other side of the other breakout room to make sure that we're getting set up in there, and I'll be right back.
Do you know, by the way, is this streaming on YouTube or is the breakouts don't stream?
This particular breakout is being recorded, and then they'll edit this and then put it on YouTube. And then I believe just the general session is what's being streamed.
Great. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll be right back. Don't go nowhere.
Okay.
Okay. want to turn you on? Are you ready just to be on?
Yeah, I'm ready. Is it being recorded?
It's being recorded.
Good. I had a few people who were asking.
Yes.
But it doesn't, oh, I guess it's gonna have what, the video? Is that the?
So this is going to be the.
Right, that's, well, this is crazy. This is, okay, can we pot it down or no? This is nuts. Okay. This is terrifying. This is, I have a timeshare for you to buy. This is not a. Jason, yeah, okay. I mean, it's good for like, this is being recorded because I'm assuming you're recording through the piped in thing. So, of course, absolutely. So that's fine. I just didn't want it. People are here and then they're just like, I'm like, the thing I'm saying is to, especially at a disinformation conference, you're having somebody who's like, you got to know, there's only one way to make money in today's market. And it's just, no, that's unhealthy. Sure. Professor TV will be on at some point.
We did have, yeah, he did join us.
Professor TV, are you there?
Hey, I'm here. I'm just setting up a couple things myself.
You have no reason to rush. I just like hearing your beautiful voice.
I
I have no idea what the structure is. I guess neither do you. We'll just go with what we got.
I consulted the briefing form about 10 seconds ago.
Ah,
And
perfect.
looks as if you are Jason Scott.
Is
I
that a
am-
bad thing or is that the greatest news you've heard today?
I'm ask me. I just clicked on your name in the link in the document. And this is, I think, a total first for me in 14 years on Twitter. I am blocked. You have blocked me on Twitter.
I am, here's the thing. First of all, I am sure you deserve it. Second of all, I'll unblock you since we're collaborators.
I don't know if we've ever even interacted on Twitter. Do you subscribe to some kind of global block list or something?
No. But sometimes I will. There's two reasons. If you, for example, if you say anything negative about the Internet Archive, that's a good example. Sometimes I'll do that because I'll block somebody because it's not good to, like, you know, suddenly get into it with somebody who's stated they don't.
Sure, fair enough. I do think that's
No, I don't think that's you.
Yeah.
I don't think that's you, but it could be also you liked something I hate. Again, a lot of this is just because I don't want to suddenly, like, I'm like, you know, I don't want to end up having somebody feel
Yep, that's right. Ooh.
like I'm, like if I see that there's going to be a conflict and we're both doing work that's considered to be relatively good, I will sometimes do that. I know that it's a crazy life, right?
Uh-huh.
What's your Twitter?
Just my last name.
Really?
Yeah.
Sometimes Twitter's a little weird with people who you
How much
block.
time do we have total?
Let's see.
Ooh, okay, great.
How am I? Oh, fantastic.
We'll be in the middle, and I'll let you know when it's 5 minutes left, but the breakout room info will be about 50 minutes.
Okay. All right. But Zittrain?
R-A-I-N.
Zittrain, right?
Yep.
Weird. The Twitter account will. I'm sorry, man. I can't. I cannot unblock you because I can't see you.
I think you can't see me because you've blocked me.
But I think that it shows me people and then says this person is currently blocked. I've got that. Let's do this. Let me do this. I think because Twitter, you know, man, the Twitter client sucks. And sometimes it does this thing. There you are. Hey, Smiley. How you doing? Can you see me?
I can see your hat.
That's great.
Wow, where is it that you can see? Okay.
Not a problem.
It's weird because I was in the room for you. And I think it was South by Southwest when you did the whole.
Yeah, and I couldn't have been nicer about the Internet Archive, if I recall correctly.
I'd have to go look. But there you go. You're back. You're back. Welcome to the wonder.
Uh-huh.
Welcome to the wonder and the happiness.
Yeah, there it is. All right. That is too funny.
You can see me ridiculing Mark Anderson. He just blocked me.
How'd you get blocked?
Oh, well, he blocks everybody.
Oh, yeah. If you talk to Mark Anderson in a manner that he considers unbecoming to his well-earned billions, he just blocks you. He just blocks you. He's just got the equivalent of two beefy dudes who just walk up and grab you and pull you away from the restaurant. Twitter's his restaurant. Anyway, he tweeted this ridiculous thing going, if you have books you want to read in the future, buy them in physical form now. And then just left it. And I'm like, what are you doing, pal? Like, that's it. He just walked away. And I'm like, what?
Like, because.
No, because ... There's no fucking because. That's like something going like, you're going to wake up tomorrow and it will be a day you won't forget soon. Like, if somebody told you that and they're worth $1 billion, what are you going to do? And so people are flipping out in his things. And I'm like, really? That's what you did? That's what you did with your time and money? You have posted this thing and people think there's going to be a super AMP, or they're suddenly worried about digital books, or they're, it's fill in the blank. I'm like, that's conduct unbecoming a billionaire. How about that? Anyway, I blocked P Mark. And he blocked me, which was.
And then did you block him in return?
No, because he's never going to unblock me because he isn't,
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
not to be that way. Look at this. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll ask ahead of time because I gotta know. Is there a student here with a preformed, almost guidance missile level question that they wish to hurl at me? Because we can do that right now. I feel
we
bad.
Need to save it.
No, because we always do this to them. And then it's like 45 minutes out of 50 minutes. The person gets up, they read the 95 theses, and we go, haha, joke. Oh, we're out of time. And that's
go.
That's how you radicalize somebody. He's like, oh, I had a perfect. Actually, though, I was talking to somebody about that. The student who stood up and like had the perfectly formed thingy that's an important lesson to learn early, is that sometimes no matter how much pre-work you do, no matter how much focus you put on like getting your story together, and you think it's going to reach its forum and then it just falls apart in front of you, are you going to just throw your paper to the floor and say, I don't want to be a part of this game? Or are you going to say, okay, next time I'll sizzle it up a little bit, or I'll put it here, or I'll lead them in? Like that's the difference. What do you do in that first big moment? Anyway, sorry. So I just want to make sure, because if there was a student here who was, I like that the students are peppered among the professionals. It makes me happy.
Does anyone with a phone on them know how we are on time? Like, should we start? Okay, great. Oh, we've got time.
Sure, plenty of time. That's why I wanted that question. But if anyone's got that question.
I'd love to look at my phone.
I'll be back in a
Hi,
minute.
hey, buddy.
Anyway, I was all excited to see you. And then boom, buddy, you're stuck at home. I get it.
We should still wait. I'm mic'd. Are we still waiting on?
Ugh.
It's back to, yeah. It's fine, we can wait. I gave it to her during lunch, but I don't know if she's so it's not that urgent. Yeah, as soon as we get our yeah. Yeah, if he's free. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
By the way, Professor TV, I really loved the speech where at the beginning you're talking about kids selecting shapes, and by the end, they're racially profiling potential terrorists. Like that was one of my favorite moments. It was like a diamond among, I'll be nice and say among a panel of rubies, but it was beautiful. So I enjoyed that. He can't hear me, he's done with me.
Oh, you're talking to me?
Yeah, I'm talking to you, Professor.
Wow, I didn't mean that in a Robert De Niro Deer Hunter way. I thought you said Professor Phoebe.
Yeah, I call you Professor TV because that's what you are.
TV, not Phoebe as in the small bird.
No, TV.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry,
the presentation. Oh gosh, that presentation was like 10 years ago. The human computing one.
I work for a place with a long memory. And but anyway, it was one of my favorites because what I loved about it was you just kept going down steps of dystopian horror and you didn't stop. Usually people stop, but anyway, I think I used some manner of that template in other things.
Well,
where you start out with a dot and a line, and by the end, people are killing people. That's a great.
Yeah. Thanks very much. That's high praise.
No, well, yeah. When it, you know, it was a shy. I loved it because I could palpably feel the revulsion in the room because they didn't. I was clear that about 9 people had thought about these repercussions, and now we're here.
Here we are.
And now here we are.
Well, as Julia Yaffe says, tomorrow will be worse.
Yeah, the worst day of your life so far.
She's the one who tells the joke that's from her father from Soviet Union times, which was, it's been an average year. It's worse than last year, but better than next year.
Perfect.
Great. Wait, so Jonathan, like, where
are you, Jonathan?
Are you?
Can you see us?
Can you see us?
I can
go
see
like
you. Yes.
Are you over? Am I pointing at you right now? No.
Not exactly. I mean, I guess.
This is so fun. Oh, hi.
Yeah, there I am. Hello.
Everyone wave to Jonathan.
That is me.
Go wave to the GLaDOS sphere.
And where is your corporeal form?
My corporeal form is in central Massachusetts.
Great. It's no Chicago.
It is no Chicago.
All right. Let's get started. I am Ellen Cushing. I'm here to moderate this panel. This is a breakout session. It's going to be casual. I'm going to ask them a few questions, but you know, if anyone has any questions, please jump in. My first question, you know, I want to kind of start narrow and then zoom out. My first question is for both of you, which is the big news, to me at least, this week is like this news about Twitter testing an edit button, which I think is so interesting. It's something that users have been asking for forever. It's also something that, as many people have pointed out on Twitter, is a sort of ticking time bomb. And I think it's a great ticking time bomb for, you know, for example, like digital media organizations have been embedding tweets in their stories for a decade now. And, you know, now that you can edit old tweets, who knows what will show up in those stories. And, you know, theoretically, a tweet could go viral and then the person who writes it changes it, and then suddenly, like, Cher has retweeted something extremely offensive, for example, or for that matter, Barack Obama has. And I want to, you know, I think this is so relevant to this panel because what we're talking about is how, like, we think of the internet as sort of a utility, kind of like an encyclopedia, but of course it's changing all the time. And I'm curious, kind of like, what the two of you make of this edit button news and what we should make of it, and whether it's a problem or I'm just overreacting.
The more we talk, the sadder we get. Jonathan, I want to defer to you because you can't read the room. Do you have a hot take on the edit?
I'm not a frequent tweeter, but I actually found myself tweeting about it either yesterday or the day before. And I guess my thought on it is that certainly making a single change to an established ecosystem it's hard for it not to be a Jenga tower or a Rube Goldberg machine that can have all sorts of knock-on effects. But at the same time, the idea that we think that Twitter is in like perfect equipoise and it just can't possibly get better seems surely not true. And to allow people to reconsider and to fix and to, in their own views, self-correct or augment, all seems to me to the better as a goal. And then it's just, all right, instead of just having a change where you can edit something, and of course, as it's pointed out, you edit out from under somebody, and if they've retweeted you, they've retweeted perhaps the opposite of what they had previously retweeted. If you change your underlying tweet, you just need to have a few more really accessible and permanent layers. So if people want to peek to say what was there before, they can. Show me the first edition. And in the second edition, show me that it is the second edition. And you could even see what edition was retweeted. There's all sorts of ways, if we're sitting around a product table and optimizing not necessarily for clicks and engagement, but for truth and for evolution with a trail of breadcrumbs behind it, that you can accomplish that. And I think it'd be a very worthy thing to accomplish. And of course, it's something that also infuses the web at large. Every time somebody links to anything using a URL, there stands the possibility that whatever is at that URL will change, so-called content drift, and you'd have the same problem that you'd have with a retweet. And that's probably a great moment to hand it off to Jason Scott, because the Internet Archive is a kind of signal example of how you might be able to have authoritative snapshots. So the history we have isn't just whatever is in front of us in the moment.
Jason Scott, take it away.
Jason Scott. It's been attributed to Mark Zuckerberg, but I can't personally verify it, that his description of Twitter is it was a clown car that backed into a gold mine. And most of that is pretty much held true. My personal opinion is Twitter does things clunkily, randomly, and with no thought to what they're doing, mostly because they stumbled backwards while working on something else, that it turned out for some reason the universe thought it needed a global IRC channel, and it just implemented it.
Can you explain what IRC is?
Absolutely.
For the students in the
Although I
room,
want to know,
perhaps?
who doesn't know what IRC is? I want to know who I'm dealing with. Oh boy.
Okay.
Read the room. Okay, 2 people. All right, fine. I'll take it. Around 1988, a group in Europe started creating a chat system that was called Internet Relay Chat. That was basically a simple way of doing almost a CB interface that we had seen in CompuServe and earlier things, where people had a handle, they would type something and it would show their handle and what they said. And it was powerful enough in a text interface and extensible enough in a text interface that it has basically become the cockroach of the internet in terms of communication. It's impossible to kill, it's extremely extensible, it's got huge amounts of decentralization. And one thing it was not was on a web page with a profile with everybody doing it, because I don't think anybody thought that would be a thing, but Twitter did unknowingly. That's what I mean. And without any of the understandings of the ramifications of all of the social problems that IRC brought and dealt with and handled and had moderation and ways to deal with safety and ways to deal with anonymous work and relaying things, they just threw it on the internet. And we've been drinking this lead-based Coca-Cola ever since. And I have no faith in most of these companies, but Twitter is now, like, one day they went from 140 to 280 characters. I mean, I used to say this about Facebook too, right? Which was, here is this thing where people have agreed to go into an environment that they have no control over. There's no system admin to call. There's no IT department to talk to. And every day you wake up and your interface is new. And I wanted to ask that question 9 times today and yesterday during the talks, because I was like, yeah, but unlike a newspaper, you don't open up the newspaper every day and they've changed where the sports section is, or every writer now has a resume next to his name. You know, like, it's nothing. You don't see any of that. But with Facebook, you wake up and it's like, we're not doing images, or we have eBay, you know, and people forget they only became status-based because Twitter was taking off. Like, they just changed their interface. So how do you fight as an institution against literally a viral alien force? So anyway, Twitter now is like, we're going to do an edit button. And it's going to be, the big question is, will we have access to the previous edits? And how long after something is written can it be edited? Is it a minute? Is it forever? And we don't get to know until it comes out. This is the only reason I'm on Twitter Blue. Actually, there's two reasons. One reason is because I want to see new features. And second of all, in theory, I'm a customer. In theory, I could sort of complain legally. Like, I'm giving you this money, why aren't you doing this?
Twitter Blue is fancy Twitter that you pay for.
That should be how they market it. We are fancy Twitter. It's just Twitter with a little monocle over the, that would be amazing.
The bird is.
The bird has a
like
monocle and a
mustache.
little top hat.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
I don't want each one thing to be like this, but so Professor Zittrain and I are very similar in terms of we both harbor a concern that people think the internet was well designed, top to bottom, like, you know, iron smelting, that it just works. You make a bar
like
of
a
iron
planned community or
and it
something.
works. Yeah, like it's a well-made piece of engineering that now is integrated into our lives. And it is not. And it was, at the current approach to things, it never will be. And yet humanity has decided to bank everything on it, just everything. So really, honestly, we now have people in the room probably, and people out there for whom there has always been an internet, for whom it might as well be electricity or clouds. And with that comes, you know, in the same way that occasionally we remember the whole problem with the electrical grid, and that like we kind of have these like transitional spaces that we'll give up, we occasionally learn about the faults in the internet the hard way. How about you, Professor?
Yeah, Jonathan, you should just interrupt us
Yeah,
whenever you
dude,
want.
just interrupt. If you were in the room, it'd be
scream and
easier, of
yell.
course.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, I guess I'm tempted to, at a distance, want to bring it back around to disinformation.
Please.
And
It's why we're here.
the sense that I think it's my colleague Joan Donovan who points out that the disinformation and unreliable stuff, even if accidentally unreliable, is usually non-paywalled. The good stuff is a lot harder to get to. Present company partially included. I guess the Atlantic, you know, has a few try until you buy sorts of things. And that's understandable, for you got to pay for the stuff that actually takes effort to produce accurately. But to understand, I think, short, medium, and long term, how to understand what we see online, how to like take it in and evaluate it. Sourcing is a big thing. You don't have to be an academic obsessed with footnotes to want to know that when somebody says something and they offer up evidence and they use the magic of the World Wide Web to share out a link to it, that you want to be able to follow that link and see what that person saw and have a sense that what you're seeing is in fact what was placed there, and then evaluate the source at that link. And I was shocked now nearly a decade ago when we did our first kind of test of link and reference rot, how many links that are embedded in documents meant to endure for the ages, how many are still there, and to find that there's kind of Swiss cheese, that half of all links in Supreme Court opinions of the United States are dead, and some of them are changed. One of them makes fun of the justices, and you can't go back so easily and change the opinion to direct it elsewhere. And we found that 3/4 of the links in the Harvard Law Review, a legal journal, no longer function. We found that in the New York Times, there were, I think, 1/4 of all a quarter of all deep links in the New York Times, which is to say links that aren't just to a domain name, but go somewhere specific on the web, a quarter of those have rotted, and half of all articles in the New York Times contain at least one rotted link. And I think those are to me pretty disturbing statistics, but ones that directly connect to the project of dealing with disinformation. Because if you can't keep something under the microscope at time equals 0 and know that it's going to be there at time equals a year later or a month later, it's really hard to have a handle on things. And it's not as if there's some great gold copy in a library somewhere. The libraries are storing stuff that may or may not map to what everybody else is using to have debates and to arrive at truth. And finally, I find myself worried that as we shift to the digital form for stuff meant to endure, like ebooks, the ebook is now the canonical edition more than some physical book somewhere for a given book. There are no processes in place for a role like that played by libraries, where if somebody came marching in the library and demanded a book off the shelf so they could rip out page 34 because they think it's inaccurate, the library would not take well to that. There's no commensurate institution in the digital space. And I was shocked to find that for Amazon Kindle, for example, they don't even keep track of the changes that are made by choice by the author, by demand by third party. Often those two merge because the author might under duress choose to ask to change something because they got a threatening letter. These are all ways in which information has gotten a little too protean, that there appear to be there's no adult supervision keeping track of this and figuring out a way to freeze humanity's knowledge as it's generated in ways that we can lean upon it and draw upon it.
Jason, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Internet Archive, and I'm really curious about like the practical harm of link rot, which, you know, as Jonathan defined, is like literally you hit a URL in a news article or a Supreme Court decision, and it goes to like either a 404 or like a Korean porn site or whatever, something else. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of practical harm as it relates to disinformation and the work you do with the Internet Archive?
Sure.
Yeah.
So just for the people who are in the room, the description in the program says I'm from textfiles.com, which is accurate. I worked on a site called textfiles.com, which was a compilation of bulletin board system, 1980s era online life text files. And I put that up, and that kind of backed me into becoming a librarian archivist. And then I made a documentary that suddenly turned me into an oral historian. And then I became kind of like the pundit, because I was one of the few people talking about like the historical range of the internet and online life. And then around 2007 or 8, I started to decry the fact that with very little warning and no real anything, entire communities were being wiped off the face of the earth, Angel Fire, GeoCities, and so on. And so I said, well, in the complete lack of any organization at all dedicated to anything like this, we should make an activist archive team that goes in and copies it all, which we started doing. GeoCities went down, we grabbed a bunch of other sites, and we've been going at it. And between 2009 and 2011, that's kind of how I became known in that space. So now suddenly I was a web archivist, and somewhere in there, I gave a fiery speech at the Internet Archive, and Brewster Kale, the co-founder of the archive, hired me, asked me what my title should be, and I said free range archivist. So I am the free range archivist of the Internet Archive, which means I'm not up in the director's side. I'm just this loudmouth weirdo at the bottom who's constantly like, you know what we need to get? We need to get Kmart announcement tapes. We need to get you know, menus from old restaurants and whatever. And he goes, well, okay, you think that's something, and I do these. And I'm also very loud, and I'm also very loquacious. So it's a nice partnership, but I never want to mislead people to think I co-founded the archive. By the time I went there, it was already well into its 15th or 16th year. You know, this organization has been around, and it was founded in 1996 by co-founded by a guy named Brewster Kahle, who had made some amount of money, believe it or not, making a search engine for Gopher Space. And then from that had gotten into what I would call Nielsen ratings for websites. And it was called Alexa Internet. And so Alexa Internet was kind of like, you are, at a time when nobody had this, like 1985, 1996, you are the 103rd ranked largest website in science, and so people really wanted that. And it was archiving websites to be able to know this information, like what had changed, what things had happened. So it was building up a small collection, and then it got bought by Amazon. And Brewster suddenly found himself a multi-hundreds millionaire. And I'll put on, when I give the tour, I'm like, this guy was worth hundreds of millions of dollars in Amazon stock in the 90s. And he could have bought an island that none of you know about and have endangered species fight to the death so he could eat the winner. But he said, I want to be a librarian. I love books more than anything. He named his firstborn son after his favorite book font. Like, this guy loves books. And
Can we pause and say what the name is?
Caslin.
Okay.
And
At least it's not like.
right. And
Helvetica.
his wife, Mary, she runs this institute for the book. I mean, these are people who, they were like, okay, we could do anything.
We should introduce Caslin to my son, Comic Sans.
There you go.
Times New Roman.
So, but like, this family said, we want to do good for the world. And I've studied them now for years. And it's like, yeah, that's what they're here for. They are doing the naive belief that humanity is worth giving it as much information as possible and saving. And one of the side effects of that was that he made a deal with that old Nielsen rating, let's scan websites place, to say, hey, can we have copies of all those websites you're scanning? That's neat. It's getting up on a terabyte. Wow. What should we do with this? And that's when they started to think about playback and the format of it. So this is all like late 1990s. And here it is, it's 2022. We are absorbing 60 terabytes of web data a day. I used the line of Eric Allman, who, when he was talking about send mail, which is an old mail protocol, he said it was a sledgehammer for a fly that turned out to be an elephant in the distance. So we are continuing to absorb this web. And obviously it's an impossible task, which sways him none. And we are continuing to try to say, well, how can we work with the resources we have? So probably the one that filters best for the group here is, we've had a deal with Wikipedia now for a number of years. If you do an outlink from Wikipedia, our Wayback Machine takes an exact duplicate of the linked website at the time you linked it and then saves it under it. And there is a bot on Wikipedia that if the site goes down, it flips over to the Wayback version. So cool. We would love to do that with newspapers. We would love to do that with other institutions. But, it's a cultural thing, and some places are for it, some places aren't. Some sites like the New York Times have enough money that they're creating unbackupable sites. They're rich, they have interactive maps, they have all this functionality that's beautiful on the day it was created, and then is dead 5 years later because it's hard to maintain, unless they have the funding to go back and renovate. I mean, it's tough. It's a tough problem. The web used to be a series of static documents. It is clearly not that now. And there are other web archiving entities, but the archive is currently pretty much the leader. I personally like competition. I like groups being involved in it, because that asks questions that might not even be on our radar. But right now, people live off the Wayback Machine. Like, lives are saved by it. People are able to prove things with it. People are able to browse it. And again, It was started by a random set of people because it was a neat idea. The same year, they started a collection of live Grateful Dead recordings, right? In the same year, they created a set of interesting public domain health films and put them up. And it was just, why don't we try this?
Yeah.
It just turned out, one of them turned out to be the fundamental underpinning of the internet's memory.
And I just wanted to point out, like implicit in your tale, Jason, I think, is that it's a tale of philanthropy. It's a tale of somebody that like saw something that ought to happen and then used the fact that the internet lets anybody put a flag on a hill and set up a new thing and even have it sound official, like archive.org, so that it becomes official.
Yeah.
And that's a form of massive philanthropy on Brewster's part. And I think fast forward to today, not only is it great then, I would say to your competition point, it's a form of just redundancy to have others out there actually taking up the same mantle and nicely linked, so that other projects maybe have more of a retail feel to them so individuals can use them. Others are more wholesale. They're just trying to archive everything and have it ready. And then there'll be still others who will take that wholesale thing and make it available to the world at large. And again, with disinformation and such, there have been a few outright philanthropists, as in people really wanting to give money to things like Craig Newmark, who are probably feeling lonely. They would love some competition in philanthropy to be supporting what otherwise is a commons that will not be tended to. And it's great to have this example of a way in which somebody could make such a big difference.
Yeah, there's a fundamental despair in terms of how it's not even a matter really of lack of resources. It's how bizarrely unevenly they'll be applied. And you'll see that, right? Like, you know, Facebook spent $1 million on a party at DEF CON. That's $1 million that would have changed something else. The problem isn't that they gave the money to that party. It's not a zero-sum game in that form. It's just, it's not as cool to give to a organization. There's a group called, I love them, they're called the Radical Monarchs. They're a competitive group to the Girl Scouts. And they're out in San Francisco, and they teach young girls on activism and speaking for themselves and protecting themselves. They're tiny, they're neat. You know, will they bloat and corrupt if they were given $50 million a year from cookies? Probably. But the fact that they exist represent that somebody foresees that, like, there, you know, there's other ways to do this, and there's not just one slot. And Brewster's first thought when he got the first few $100 million wasn't to go, how do I get the next few $100 million? How do I make it $1 trillion, right? It was, what good could I do with this? And, you know, he's thrown money here and there. There's one negative album, there's one Negative Land album that can thank him, for example. Actually, there's a few bands where he just said, I like your music. Why haven't you made a new piece of music? And they're like, well, we haven't gotten, and he just was like, and he's not on the credits, right? He's not there. He's the reason that album got made. And I would love that to be kind of like the coolest thing you, like the fact that Elon Musk doesn't spend 50% of his time on the net changing lives on a personal down basis at the same time. And I don't care how he dresses it up or whatever, elon.org, whatever, right? I mean, there's engineering problems there, but I heard he's into engineering problems, right? I mean, Mackenzie Scott has the same problem, which is that she's given away all this money and has more now, right? She can't get rid of the money fast enough. So I would love to see philanthropy be as cool as getting back 10 times on your investment.
I want to return to something you said
Sure.
earlier. you said that the Internet Archive has saved lives. Is that a metaphor or has it really saved lives? And if so, how?
Sure. So several. So are you like? So to be clear, I don't know of a specific case that somebody was dying of a disease. They put the Internet Archive in front of them.
Right.
And they got out of bed.
I'm just curious because I think, like I use the Internet Archive to see like, websites that have 404'd or, like I use it for pretty dumb reasons.
Sure.
But I'm curious, like
Sure.
what are like
I'll give you a good
human stakes here?
I'll give you a good one. So GeoCity starts up. They have this deal, 10 megabytes of free space. And for some people, and I've said this before, GeoCities for some genetic lines may be the most largest audience that genetic line has ever faced. And some people took it, like I want to talk about Star Trek, but there were cases of people who had been in Vietnam and so on, who wrote out their entire histories on GeoCities and then died, partially from things they picked up in Vietnam, and their widows and their families couldn't reach it because they didn't have the passwords. And so they just watched with horror, and there's no functionality for retrieving it. We're a little better now, but you couldn't like submit a death certificate to them and get it back.
Right.
And it went away when GeoCities went down. And the archive team and Internet Archive had some individual projects. And so we would get letters from families of like, we thought it was gone forever. You're the only one who had it, right? So in there, you're saving a metaphorical life in terms of a person's creation, right? But I've also had people who were literally despairing to great devastation, personal devastation, that they lost their material, an upgrade, a mistake, reporters who had their entire writing record was gone because an online newspaper went away for that like period of time when Gothamist like disappeared off the web, and we had full
San Francisco
copies.
Magazine, all my clips are gone.
Right, and so we pulled a lot of that back for people, and for some people, they refer to it as the difference between feeling suicidal, that they had left nothing behind them, and suddenly they found they had it again. So I'll say, yeah, we saved lives. I just don't want to point. I don't want to say that if you inject this in your veins, you'll live forever. But it's definitely a case of it's too easy to denigrate or dismiss how much we've integrated online life into our life, right? The up and down part of it, our history, our finances, our memories. The line that we use a lot when I give talks and so on is the nightmare of the eternal present, which is where every day you wake up with no memory before. And while we're certainly getting a lesson in the last few years that you can say to somebody, this happened this way before, and the person goes, no, it literally did not. And you're like, oh my God, oh God. Like, when I saw The Wave, which was this fictional, if anyone here know the show The Wave? So The Wave is like this like PSA-ish movie from like the mid-1980s, kind of based off a real thing, where this crazy teacher going a little bit off the ranch kind of like made essentially a proto-fascist group within the school and gave them their own badges and their own marches, and over time, and then he revealed it was part of a national movement. And they came to the gym to meet the leader who was going to broadcast, and he just plays them Hitler. You'll watch that in the 80s and you go like, that's lesson learned, buddy. I'm afraid of organized groups that are weird and mistreat others. I'm half in the bag now about whether or not half the people go like, awesome. And that really bothers me. Like, I did not expect that twist. And that's happening, right? Where we're going like, oh, it's darker than I thought. And I think pretty dark. But I like to think that in the face of that terrible situation, you have to continue focusing on these big questions of like, can we maintain memories? Can we persist through periods? Is what we're going through forever? Or is it like, is this just the weird shake of injecting the internet in your veins for 20 years? And it's gonna like, oh, okay, all right. Like, it's much harder. It's like, it's so much harder to do a lot of what like flew nicely in the 50s now, because we grew up and understood that like network television isn't always this or that, or it does like we matured in some ways, and now we have this brand new medium and we just dropped it on a big pie just on the populace, and you're watching family relatives go through probably what I went through at 15, where I was like, the world is out there. These are the smartest people. They know all the right things, and everything I'm reading has been vetted. This is a beautiful, glorious insight into the sad world that came before and that I'm going to fix. And you're just watching the people suffer. Am I getting to, what do you call it? I'm not running for anything. And
Maybe you should,
and I
man.
don't have the solution. I want to point out, like, the Internet Archive is an experiment about, can this important medium have a historical archive in a functional way? And unfortunately, archives are a two-way street. They are, you can't, I mean, you know, you can be happy that like that wonderful photographer, and I wish someone in the room knew her name, she took all these photos and then she died, and like families found her film, and she had like just been taking like amazing New York brownie photos for 40 years, right? But she wasn't working with anybody. We now get to go, well, whatever she thought was important is now preserved because she had the eye for it, but there wasn't an organized set to her.
Right.
And without that collaboration, without websites and forums and places working to go, here's all of our stuff in a little annoying, you know, formatted file for others to grab to mirror for later, we're playing this game. It's the difference between, you know, being handed blueprints to the house and running around taking photographs in the windows. It's a fundamentally different operation, but we need it. And that's where, you know, so, you know, when Professor, I'm sure you have something yourself to say with this, but you've made books and I've made hay about how this is such a fundamental part of the democratic and societal process to have a memory, citation, accuracy, even if people derive wild conclusions from it. But now we have really cashed that in at the casino, and we've gambled on it for instant access, fun entertainment, and immediate joy or emotion anyway.
Well, it's certainly strange to have a technology that is at once, on the one hand, so accessible and easy and free and reliable and instant until it isn't. And it's just really hard for any given participant in the space, ones with all good faith, whether on the supply side with a message or something they're conveying, or on the demand side with people who want to get to stuff and in turn may link it out to others. Why wouldn't you use what's right in front of you? It's very much the kind of just-in-time supply chain that works great until it doesn't. And I think, Jason, your stories are extremely compelling of examples of the collection and preservation of what might seem to be ephemera at one moment and turn out to be significant cultural memory later, whether it's Kmart Blue Plate special menus or Grateful Dead recordings. I complement worries about how to preserve that with kind of structural, systemic, civic worries about the fact that whatever you're leaning on, oh, I remember there was that program that said X, I want to go back and find it. You just never know if it's still going to be there, or if it is there, if it has been elided in some form. under consistent and structural pressure, once there's an opportunity to elide it, there will be people and institutions that want to see the record elided.
Right.
And we have not had a chance to confront that because of the raw physics of the way that knowledge used to be produced, which was on 20-pound acid-free paper in the millions of copies that got distributed all around, with institutions who like train the people within the institutions, I'm talking about libraries, of course, to, you know, not let the stuff get mutilated or lost. And there's just none of that layer here. So kind of back to disinformation, I even worry that the artifact of the URL, here's a link to the thing, and if only we can preserve that link, we're good. Just have to remember where it was and what it said. That's vanishing. We're in a world of apps that don't have a link. You're kind of screenshotting as best you can, or screen recording what you see and then shoving it in a folder somewhere and hoping you can find it later. It's an extremely difficult way to have any process of reflection, of education, and of dialogue around artifacts that are messages, instead of just, here's what I'm thinking in this moment, happen. And I think if you look at it that way, maybe no surprise that it's harder and harder as a society to follow the thread of an argument, even if all the parties are in good faith, like trying to figure something out together. I'm very much aware there might be some questions among people, and we have 12 minutes.
Yeah, we'll turn it over to questions in just a minute, but as kind of a closing thought, Jonathan, I need to credit you because the title of this breakout session is stolen from a piece you wrote for The Atlantic several years ago called "The Internet is Rotting." And in that story, which is wonderful, you say the internet is a collective hallucination.
Mm-hmm.
And can you expand a little bit on that? And then I'm curious what you have to say too, but can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, in fact, I think it picks up on exactly the story Jason was telling to open up this conversation today. It's a collective hallucination in the sense that once you think about it, it's so weird. There's no CEO of the internet. There's no company that makes internet. There's no toll-free number to call that is the internet when things don't work. And it's a flavor of technologies that in the past I've, in contrast with their counterparts, called either generative or non-generative technologies. You might also think of them as civic or non-civic, or more recently, owned and unowned. There are technologies that no one entity owns, and I mean that in a very specific sense. There's nobody particularly formally credentialed that is in charge of producing and tending to the technology. So, you know, Sony makes VCRs, or more recently, Sony makes, you know, clocks, or any, you know, laptops. And they respond to market pressures and maybe to regulatory pressures, so that the batteries in the laptops don't overheat and that they have the features that people want. But if you have a problem with your Sony laptop, you know whom to call. And most of the technologies, certainly prior to the internet, that we encountered day by day, technologies at least that were things you got at stores, were owned technologies. And that meant that we collectively knew whom to hold responsible when they went wrong, or if we wanted to have some mandate to shape them, a baby's crib, anything, you could do that, in that case, for safety. Unowned technologies are much more emergent, and they have the capacity to surprise us, to evolve in strange directions. The internet is a canonical example of that. And some of the things that Jason was talking about are within the internet examples of that, like internet relay chat, or news groups, or email. There's no CEO of email. There is Gmail, and there's Yahoo Mail, and there's your university's email, or there's Atlantic.com, but there's no overall email. It's a set of protocols which are just agreements among all the people who code email programs that say this is how email will work. And there's an internet engineering task force that sounds awfully official, but kind of like Brewster's Internet Archive. It's just some people who got together and said, let's design protocols for an experimental network. And they might even say in 2022 that the jury is still out on these protocols, but they have no enforcement powers. They can't tell you if you're Cisco building routers or if you're somebody writing an email program or Zoom, you have to use them. It's just if you don't, you might find it difficult to have your program work because everybody else appears to be using them. That's once they're established, they have this amazing inertial force that is de facto kind of the force of law, even though there's no constabulatory mechanism for keeping people on top of it. And when something is therefore a collective hallucination like that, we say there's an internet because there are all common protocols we use, but there's no one actually individually responsible legally or in exercise of power for making them. Not to say that everybody equally can do it, but it's very different from the normal technologies that many of us grew up with. There are all sorts of other dynamics and ones that implicate all of the issues this conference is about. We are so lucky that I think the internet came about and it produced such astonishing things like the web itself, not produced by Web Inc., but by a wonderful guy named Tim Berners-Lee, who like in his off hours at a particle accelerator, designed a web server and a web client and the protocols for saying and said, here world, it's all yours. And the world uses it. So that's what I meant by collective hallucination. It's wonderful. It's also means you can end up in ruts that are really hard to fix, even if everybody sees how it could be better or there's a real problem. And establishing trails when things change or evaporate. When you look at this now library that we are all relying on, it's not some niche thing. And you're like, yeah, it's actually a distributed library. It's called what people have in their houses on their shelves. And they kind of voluntarily just contribute to an index. And if you need a book, you just find out what neighbor might give it to you and good luck. Like that starts to sound a little jerry-rigged for society's knowledge.
Thank you. Jason?
2 years ago, they tried to sell the .org domain to a private equity firm. Does everyone know that? It was just decided they were going to do it and they were all talking about it. And then a bunch of other people went, what are you doing? But like a lot of people bought in on it because a lot of people were about to make a lot of money. Which is why, I maintain what Jonathan says, which is that the internet is a miracle. But at this point, we can't pretend that the kind of the rule of this technology, like the internet up to now was we got a good thing going, don't mess it up, which was the belief that like once the government came in, it wouldn't work. They'd wreck it. Its freedom would be gone. It wouldn't be the same. It'd be this, it'd be that. There was horror when the post office was going to try to control one domain to have an email address for each physical address. And they were going to and so this resistance of like, without that, we can't grow. And that was fine. I understand that. Like, don't bother us. We're base jumping off of, technology. This is awesome. Stop trying to tell us what to do, except now everything's on it. And there are cases where people can't do the fundamental building blocks of being a participant in democracy without having a web address and without having a browser, where it's like, sure, if you go down, you can go see that the office is closed. I mean, for me, when I see the local movie theater where I used to live, just put their web address up on their movie theater sign outside the sign. It was like, go here, they just didn't want to send any human being up to like put letters up there anymore. And anybody who doesn't have a web address, good luck with that movie theater, You're going to have to make the effort. Well, switch instead of movie theater, now do medical care, now do like financial checks, now do text things. So at that point, you cross a threshold to me and you end up with an entity that, fine, have a Wild West area out there, but not the default. And there's a phrase. No, I'm going to skip that. That doesn't sound good. But the thing is, but I'll summarize what I usually say it for shock value. But the shock value is, sure, do your crazy underground whatevers. But right now we have gotten it to the point that we have said, do your crazy whatevers at any Starbucks you want to at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, and all your kids are invited.
Right.
You know, and that's a big difference. That you can have both. You can have a situation where people are doing things like whatever, but we have now monetized it to say, and that's the theme of this thing. So if you've been sitting through it, it's wow, they've monetized
Right.
pushing the worst parts everywhere.
Right.
And that's not sustainable.
Right. I'm gonna cut you off so we can have time for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Just shout it out.
Well, these two,
Oh, sorry, I only saw,
I'm gonna break a pool stick in half. And
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
sir.
Assuming the following premises are true, one is as we're trying to archive the web, that there's more of the web that we can archive at a given moment in time. And secondly, that there's tons of disinformation, dark stuff on the internet, sadistic stuff on the internet. The question is there and should there be a value judgment for what?
Jonathan, could you hear that?
I could not.
Oh, okay, the question.
Assuming the premises that you can only save some of the internet, and the second one, that there is disinformation and dark net and the worst parts of the internet, should there be value judgments in archiving? Told you I'm the memory guy.
Wow, that's great.
So if we can't be what they call completionists about what we save, should you be making judgments about what you save? And I think the answer is surely yes. I'm supportive of the idea of having those who are in a position, credentialed as curators, making those judgments, which of course are judgments that get made all the time when a library has a finite budget for its books or a museum for artifacts, or even just for space in a humidity controlled room for what gets put in the ark for later and what doesn't. There's surely a role for that. And it might mean saving stuff that is disinformation precisely so you have saved that too. And at the same time, there is an opportunity to have people saving on the demand side in some collective form. We started something called perma.cc or perma.link around 2015, which allows anybody that is about to put a link into something they're doing, a newspaper article, a judicial opinion, a piece of academic work, anything kind of meant for the ages, and submit it to a consortium of over 200 libraries, including the Internet Archive, which then take a snapshot of what's there and return a permalink that can then be placed alongside the original link. And at that point, the person writing the document that has the link in it is the curator, is the person who is absolutely not able to be a completionist. They're only putting one link in, but they are contributing to a distributed set of decisions about what's worth saving. And it might well mean that everybody pointing to US government documents, all right, those are going to get saved, have permalinks, and you're about to go to the, whatever it might be, nih.gov to get that medical article. And oops, there's a government shutdown. And the last time we had a government shutdown, all US government sites were down. They returned 404 errors on purpose on the presumption, I guess, that the hamsters couldn't be paid to run on the wheels to power the servers. So you could, with the permalink, still get to that stuff if what's being pointed to is gone. And those choices are being curated not centrally by librarians or others, but by each individual person as they are putting together documents and choosing to source stuff.
We are unfortunately out of time. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank the two of you especially. I really appreciate it. Those of you who are in the room, you might be able to grab us for a couple minutes, but I think the next session starts in 5 minutes, probably less than that. Thank you all so much. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I guess.
See you later, Professor.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.
You
Oh, great. Great. Oh, yeah.
can ask me the question.
library in central Massachusetts called the American Antiquarian Society.
Right?
They will collect